Joined by Erimodafe. Henry, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Thierry.
So Henry is the managing director of Ava Capital and Innova Capital as well. Former head of UBS.
Nigeria at UBS, yeah.
Nigeria and Africa. Henry, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and what brings you here to Zug and the Crypto Valley?
Well, like most of us, I think it's what is happening at the Crypto Valley, the whole excitement about digital finance. The Crypto Valley is known in Switzerland as a place where it happens. Apart from being part of the digital Valley system here, I also run my operations at Alva Wealth, which is a multi-family office here in Zug as well. So that's why I'm primarily in Zug.
So I would say you come from the old world of banking. No offense, I come from the old world of commodity trading.
Yeah.
Things are moving forward now. What is your vision for the banking world with the new technology that we have now?
It is quite interesting that you say that. In the last couple of weeks, there seems to be a talk of renaissance of the classical banks, but I do agree with you, finance is changing. The key word is digital, which is being driven by blockchain technologies. What we see happening right now is the fact that digital products are more and more being introduced into the financial space, and you find a lot of financial companies now adopting these products. So 2 years ago here in Zug, even though you could use Bitcoins to pay for taxes, I was claiming it was very difficult to even have bank accounts. But today we have almost three digital banks fully licensed, which are developing financial products for the market. And now it seems like it's cool. So I think that's a major transformation for the Swiss space. And to answer your question, classical finance is now really taking a closer look as to where these digital banks are going, because if you have these digital products being distributed by these digital banks, it's going to be a matter of time in terms of the huge market that's been created that traditional banks, so private banks, would need to ask themselves the question as to why their clients are missing out of the huge growth that we actually see is happening in this space.
You don't want to be left behind,
absolutely,
right? So,
absolutely.
I mean, it's always like the first mover advantage sometimes, and then everybody else that follows. I agree with that. I think, it makes me think of globalization, as things are more globalized, competition intensifies, as technology grows exponentially, the fast pace that comes with that is also transforming. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that Switzerland, that had the reputation of being rather slow, is actually taking a big step. And I think it's also a cloud environment. This is the principle of cloud, right? People who are alike start coming with the
decentral economies.
Exactly.
Where, I think the canton of Zug has done a fantastic job of creating an environment which actually enabled like the Crypto Valley Lab to sort of emerge, and a lot of things have fed on themselves in terms of success, right? And I remember about 2 years ago when you came in here, you see the number of companies that were being created daily. And then you had that hype phase, and then it sort of died down. And right now, we see a lot of those ideas are beginning to mature, which is quite exciting. If you look at the portfolio, for example, of some of the companies in the lab, it's amazing.
That's
and
true.
I mean, you cannot not look at that in terms of what kind of value they're creating in the space, right?
It's very true. It's like there's another principle you pointed out, which is sometimes you are too early, sometimes you're too late. It makes me think of Napster when MP3s went out and started democratizing a little bit like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you had you had them shut down.
Yeah,
but then
true.
now you see Spotify, which is basically the exact same thing, but in a monetized way, in a regulated way, and that works. And,
and think of Netflix,
right.
which has revolutionized the whole streaming space.
Yeah.
Think of Revolut.
Yeah. And
you
then,
know.
And then there's also, sometimes it's not the first one, which is the opposite of what I just said before.
True.
You had Yahoo, you had Alta Vista, and then Google came only after, but still now they are the leaders. So it's about execution, but it's also about timing. And sometimes it's good to be early. Sometimes it's better to take your time. Hopefully, we're going to do the right thing here at Agile. But okay, so following up on the principles, would you help us to come up with the principles of success in life overall?
Look, life happens, all right, and I think consistency is a key thing. I do not believe that certain people who we consider or concept which we consider successful were taught through on day one. The garage stories of all the tech billionaires, they didn't think it all through to where they are right now. Get a vision and be consistent in execution. Stick with it. Learn along the way, adapt, and that way one has a fair chance at success.
That's so true.
You can never know the end until you start the journey.
We were speaking about that the other day, about being a little bit like water, right?
Absolutely.
Like Bruce Lee saying, be like water.
Yeah.
And then path of
You
least
need
resistance.
to find
sometimes.
your path, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good principle for the audience. And what do you think are going to be the principles for people now who want to enter the space in order for them to be successful?
I think it's going to be important to make sure one has a global view of what you're doing. Global in the sense that, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has shown to us that the world is a very, very small village. If you apply, that principle to commerce as well, it means, like we say, we can think globally, because, I mean, people are talking of Bitcoins in Lagos and in Ecuador and in all kinds of places. So digitization enables us to be able to have a global economy. So I think one of the keys of success, especially if you're operating within, say, Switzerland, is not to allow yourself to just be shaped by the local environment, but have a broader view. Because some of the things I keep saying when I come to the Crypto Valley, some of the things that are being developed here have more relevance for Africa than the place where it's been created. And if one does not have that view in terms of how do you connect it to the market where it is actually required, you might fail here. But if one sort of has that view, you create a product here and it has relevance in another place, that might just be the key. So having that open mindset, that global view, and global in the sense in terms of how you look at solutions to problems. So that open mindset, I think, is going to be key, because things are changing and we can never foresee them. So if we stick to our narrow visions, then we might be in a situation where we go, oh, it's not working. But if we stay flex in our thinking and react to the environment, we develop our solutions as we go ahead, as opposed to having a fixed one. So here comes again the water analogy we talked about before. That's about developing solutions as we hit problems. I think that's going to be very important for those who come into the space, who want to succeed in the future.
And also different consumers, different people don't look at the same thing from the same vantage points. I'm talking about, for example, at Agile, we are doing gold. We obviously are grounded in Switzerland. Crypto Valley before was the commodity valley with Glencore and all of the big commodity players. I come from that world, and also, I always say it's kind of putting the three best things of Switzerland in one bucket, right? So it's commodity trading, banking, and now technology, all powerful in one single idea. But for Switzerland, it's a good headquarter to get the talent, to get the regulation, to get grounded. But the market is, as you said, the market is somewhere
it's a global
else.
one.
And sometimes the product, in this case, a stable token backed by gold, is more useful as money in overseas, in countries like Mexico and Latin America, where I'm from, or in countries
in African countries as well,
and Asia as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in Switzerland, they would see it as, it's the old tradition of owning gold and seeing gold not as an investment today, because the problem of currency is not as bad here with the Swiss franc.
I mean, stability is the other name of the Swiss franc.
So the principle of money, right? If you look at it, besides the fact of unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value, is also, in my view, to be apolitical.
Yes.
And that is very hard to obtain if you are not, if you're dealing with central banks, because we all know that at the end of the day, it's not really true. They're monetizing the debt more than any time before. We saw that in 2009 when Bitcoin was created. We saw it even more today. So I think this is also like an analogy of what is happening today is not so much that people are looking at Bitcoin, it's just they are pushed there by the circumstances of today, by the central banks.
Because of the status of central banks and inflation, which is eating value, and there seems to be no other way to go. Of course, people would naturally go to gold, but we have the classical challenges of gold, which is not very easily divisible in a way that, apart from paper gold, of course, right? So, which for me is one of the key use cases of Agile, that the major challenge we have with gold, which is making it divisible and transferable very easily, is solved. Now, gold itself remains gold, especially if it stays properly stored away and you can move it around in the digital world. I think that's just such a great concept.
I'm gonna double click on if it's stored properly, because I think this is very important also for the audience, is that historically gold has to be stored in Switzerland because of the apolitical position of Switzerland, but then also because the risk of being basically taken over by the state, confiscated, like we saw in I believe it's 1931 with Roosevelt. There is an executive order where forbids you to own bullion, and that's how they started the paper gold standard with Bretton Woods. Switzerland served as a safe haven at that moment, and thereafter to store the gold. And so this is why it's not because it was a little bit of the clout, but it's also because the regulatory standpoint of Switzerland, for the audience who is watching, is we have a direct democracy.
And private property, which is respected, is entrenched in the constitution. You can't change it without asking the people.
Right, so you need to do a referendum, and I don't think the Swiss people, who are rather on the capitalist side, want to turn into full Bolsheviks, right? So